IICEC'in değerli takipçileri
Distinguished followers of IICEC, distinguished speaker panelists of our webinar, distinguished participants, valued members of the press, I greet all of you with respect. In today's program, we have exchange. IICEC Director Boris Shekip-Güray has lost his beloved father, so he won't be able to join us. We would like to wish him and his family condolences. In previous IICEC conference webinars, World Power Crisis, the role of renewables, energy security, clean energy, and role of financing, power and climate trends and their reflections on Turkey, net zero emission future, today and tomorrow of renewable energy, clean energy, and climate change topics have been addressed through a variety of approaches. In this past December, IICEC Turkey Renewable Energy Vision flagship report first launch presentation was done by Dr. Fatih Birol, President of International Power Agency. Since then, public-private sector and from academia, there's been a great interest. We'd like to thank you for the interest shown. The main theme of work of IICEC from now on will be Turkey Hydrogen Roadmap and flagship report, which we're going to be sharing with you soon. The topic of today's seminar is for a sustainable future, renewable energy opportunities. Renewable, as you know, solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass, things that can be reproduced. So they conceptually point to renewability, and sustainable is something that takes note of security, minimum emission, environment-friendly, integrative approach. Metaphorically, it's the concept of homeostasis in medicine. Homeostasis simply means ensuring the sustainability of the future for continuing with the right functions. The root of the word is a dynamic, changing. So when we look at the net zero concept, theoretically, it's the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted to the atmosphere and taken from the atmosphere. It is to balance them in a way that will be zero, basically not adding new emissions to the atmosphere. So there will be no unbalancing additions. So as far as systematic continuity, sustainability becomes possible. If there's sustainability, the system will continue successfully. If there's no sustainability, in the mid to long term, there will be vital problems. While we're talking about mid to long term, English economist and philosopher John Maynard Keynes has said that in economic macro policies, he went for short and long-term evaluations. He's known to have said, he liked to joke, in the long run, we're all dead, he used to think, as a joke. While saying that, in the sense of economic sustainability, he had the system will self-correct, he said, if we wait long enough. But self-correction in greenhouse gases may spread over millions of years. However, the release of greenhouse gas emissions are continuing. A sustainable homeostatic balance, and there's a life cycle depending on it. This sensitive cycle needs to be sustainable, and it is harmonious among the other elements of the system. For instance, water, food, energy, ecosystem, that nexus constitutes systematic harmony, which should not be disrupted. We look at hydrology in Europe. It's the biggest drop of the last 500 years. Spain is suffering significantly. On the other side of the continent, Mexico, there's water distribution. Laundry is being washed in common laundrettes, and hydrological resources. Their sustainability will be a question mark maybe under these circumstances. Through renewing in the category of renewability, will the hydro resources remain in that category? Of course, we hope these questions will not be on the agenda in the future as humanity. Since the Industrial Revolution, greenhouse gas emissions are causing climate changes. And as far as homeostatic balance, this is an important problem because, as you know, average temperature, if it exceeds 1.5, all balances will be disrupted. IPCC reports say that climatic changing by human hand has reached incredible levels. With that, climate change introduces extremities in weather, excessive heat, drought, agricultural producers being reduced, rains turning into floods, rain that should be falling in 1 year, falling in 1 day or weeks, elevation of sea levels, and floods in countries with coasts, and the abolishment of many animal species are significant. The increase in that 1.5 temperature is critical for climate change. And for that target, International Energy Agency in 250 report has said that global energy system reaching net zero by 2050. A comprehensive roadmap has been put forth in order to bring down to zero renewable energy, energy efficiency, electrification, hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels, bioenergy, and carbon capture and storage. These are going to be the main columns. These are the main headings. Stanford University has an AI-based modeling where the world will be seeing 1.5 degrees in 2030s, reaching the net zero target if it's going to take half a century. The heating that will increase 2 degrees. Stanford's AI is very sure of himself. Are there good developments? No doubt, yes. International Energy Agency figures say that last year, 60% of electricity plants are solar, close to 30% are wind. We're going to listen to the details. And all of these are renewable energy. However, again, when we look at the figures, in 2030, the emissions need to be reduced by 50%, but it seems very difficult given the current figures. The president of International Energy Agency and IICEC National President Fatih Birol has said that by 2030, even if we can't reach 50% reduction targets in emissions, maybe after 2030, stronger steps may happen. Today, we have very distinguished speakers in our panel, distinguished participants, moderators and panelists. They have allocated their valuable time to be with us. We'd like to thank them as IICEC. About the issues, there are thematic keywords: solar, wind, hydrogen, energy storing, geothermal, climate change, net zero, sustainable investment and financing models. And the rest belongs to Ms. Elif. And before I turn it over to Elif Hanım, supporting all activities of IICEC are valuable members of the board: IICEC to Turkey, Borsan EMBW, EP, Enerjisa, Eren Holding, ING Turkey, Sanko Enerji, Shell, Sokar, and Zorlu Energy. And you, distinguished participants, we'd like to thank you all. I'm greeting you respectfully, and I'm turning it over to Elif Düşmez Tek. I hope for a wonderful panel. My respects. Dear Dawn, we'd like to thank you because you made a very inspiring opening speech. Everybody who's watching us, I would like to greet you with love and respect. As the energy sector, as you all know, in recent years, there's been great changes, transformations, uncertainties, and crises. First, as dear Doğan has touched upon it, this change and transformation, the first triggering point has been climate change. And the energy transformation triggered by climate change. While talking about that, then we encountered the COVID pandemic, and with that, supply-demand imbalances, and then supply chain problems have come about. A big period of uncertainty is what we went through. Just when we started to cope with the pandemic challenges, there's some the Russia-Ukraine war. Europe has been mostly impacted. A big energy supply security crisis has come about. Of course, all of these developments are triggering big changes in the energy sector. And of course, we're witnessing new balances being established. There are those that we already know, but there are those that we don't know. We're just trying to estimate. And from the Turkey perspective, on the one hand, there are risks that we have to manage. On the other hand, there are new areas of opportunity. We've been observing them. The management of the risks and understanding the opportunities better. Of course, analytical-based estimations are very important. IICEC has prepared Turkey Energy Outlook. And most recently, Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook work has been completed. Analytical structure of the study and the comprehensiveness of the issues they have addressed, and they prepared very well, one of the leading studies in its field. You can access this work from IICEC's website. Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook, Turkey's renewable projects, energy security, clean energy transformation, competitive and technology-focused industry development. It presents us with great opportunities and this growth potential, including HR development, presents the stakeholders with suggestions, 7 concrete recommendations that I would like to remind you of, and you will be able to see those on the screen. Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook. The first suggestion is renewable energy resources should be integrated. Turkey's supply security figures should be included because especially the power development on the electricity side, the basic access will be on the renewable energy. The first suggestion says in 2050, more than 250 gigabyte of total renewable energy installed power, 85% of renewable electrical share, 50% of total renewable shares should be there, and roadmaps, sources, technologies, and sectors should be determined for this. Second suggestion is efficient, deep, cost-reflective, and foreseeable electricity market. For it to operate, sustainable investments and financial models should be developed, and thanks to this only can we have a strong growth on the projects. And this is the importance of how the market works. Third is electricity system. The backbone are the grids. Their capacity and flexibility should have long-term dynamic planning. It should be reinforced by investment. Next suggestion is wind and solar technology. The developments there should be used in the sustainability of supply chain, and Turkey should be the base for production of clean energy and energy storage and green hydrogen production technologies. The development here should be integrated into our lives. Fifth suggestion is in buildings and industry, in transportation and other electricity consuming technologies in addition to clean energy, direct renewable energy contribution should be increased at least threefold so that energy security and clean energy transformation can be supported. 6 is in the value chain, energy efficiency potential and digitization solutions to be benefited so that the growth in the renewable energy ecosystem can be transformed into high added value opportunities. And last suggestion is in renewable energy, strong and sustainable growth and competition supporting qualified HR should be integrated into the ecosystem. All of these suggestions, of course, I try to remind you very rapidly, but our panelists will be talking to you about this. Each and every one of them are experts about how we can reach those targets in their fields. They will be sharing those in detail. And with your permission, I would like to go on to our panel. And first of all, I would like to introduce our panelists. Dear İhsan Bayçöl, IICEC General Manager. Welcome, İhsan Bey. Hello. Ibrahim Erden Türev, President of the Board. Ibrahim Bey, welcome. Dear Ali Kındap, Geothermal Energy Association, President of the Board. He is joining us from the US right now. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you.
We have Dietrich Vandenberg with us. He's managing director and global lead for renewables and power at ING Bank. And he's traveling a lot, but I think, Dietrich, you are joining from Netherlands, right? Welcome.
Yes, from Amsterdam. From Amsterdam. Thank you.
Amsterdam. Thank you for joining our panel.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Ve sevgili Nurşen Numanoğlu,
and dear Nurşen Numanoğlu, in TÜSİAD, Climate and Environment Change, Sectoral Policies, Climate Change. She's with us. Welcome.
Çok teşekkürler. IICEC'de davetleri için teşekkürler.
Evet,
Thank you for the invitation. So, indeed, these are exciting times because, as I have mentioned, all our panelists have in-depth knowledge about our topic. We have prominent panelists with us. So, with your permission, I'd like to start off with İhsan Bey, if I may. So from the investment perspective, including the investment conducted by Enerjisa in the scope, I'd like to proceed as follows. Of course, the power sector, electricity sector, will have renewable power stations as its backbone. And of course, wind and solar are more on the forefront. I'd like to make a couple of references to the report. By the year 2050, renewable will have a share of 85%. Again, in 2050, solar and wind will have 2/3 of the total investment. So when this is the picture, when this is the reality or the expectation, let's say this is a forecast. And on the other hand, of course, I'd like to turn our faces to Enerjisa, thermal and renewable energy power station. They have in their spectrum, and of course Sabancı has renewable energy targets. We make observations about the progress that they're making. So my question is as follows. From the perspective of an investor in this journey of renewable energy growth, what do you have as your agenda items? How is your roadmap being shaped? Because it's not only renewable that your portfolio is composed of, but then again, let us hear from you, İhsan Bey. Hello, once again, thank you. I would like to I would like to echo your words. I would once again like to express my condolences to Bahadur, and I also would like to thank IICEC for the report generated, because there was this requirement or need, there was this gap in the market, so this analysis report filled in that gap. For all ecosystems, it's valuable, it's precious to have a guide, to have guidance. An international energy plan recently published provides guidance to the sector. While of course there are always areas for improvement, there may be other titles to dig further into, but this has been one of the requirements. I had mentioned that during last year's panel discussion. I had insisted that this is important. We still don't know the target for wind and solar, Turkey's target for wind and solar. We were saying, we insisted that this should be prepared, and this is going to provide momentum to the whole sector. We had said, knowing about the sector, numerical targets have to be disclosed as well. We were saying, because as energy production, I believe that if I know Turkey's targets for these renewable energy sources, I will then be in an effort to convince the shareholders to invest more in these areas. But then again, if there is someone willing to have an academic work in renewable, even the dissertation thesis or the studies may be shaped accordingly. So from an unknown, from a world filled with unknowns, we are now switching to the world of knowns. That is very important. Before I go into the detail of the topic, I'd like to make a reminder, no matter what your target is, no matter what your objective is, it's up to the human being to reflect their culture. So this is very important as we head towards 2030, 2040, 2050, as we set targets for zero carbon world. Human beings come first. That will be the priority, and then the culture formed by by those human beings will be adopted accordingly. We know that there are gaps when it comes to certain geographies. We need to have well-educated human resources. We urgently need that. Along with that, one of the shortcomings of the sector, as you have also heard this, Elif Hanım, energy sector needs more women as employees. That's a very important journey. We have 1,000 megawatts of wind power station project, and our aspiration, our ambition in that project is that once those power stations become operational, we would like to make sure that at least a couple of power stations will have female directors, will have female engineers, so that as you enter into a power station, one day we will have power stations filled with female employees only. So we have started, we have set forth on a journey, and hopefully one day we'll make it. So we will then make sure that equal opportunities and rights are to be granted to women as well. I'm not going to go specifically into the details of our activities as Enerjisa production. Rather, I'd like to focus on the sector. We have approximately 4,000 megawatts of installed capacity. We have a diversified portfolio, and it's not only for Enerjisa and its shareholders. This power is also is power for the whole country, because Enerjisa or Turkey has 2 natural gas power stations. In order to put the supply and demand on a balance, we have taken action, and in order to provide relief to the economy, we took action. So the diversified structure of our portfolio helps us take action and Enerjisa is in this journey, but at the same time, we are running after a future-proof portfolio. This is a dynamic sector. We have so many variables, but then again, supply and demand should always be on equal footing. That's the rule of thumb. In order to ensure that in a healthy manner, in order to ensure that everyone has access to electrons at any time, we have to ensure certain conditions. For instance, appropriate hertz and appropriate infrastructure should be available. That's why we are planning the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So in the short, mid, and long term, 1,500 megawatt capacity of wind energy we will ensure. We are going to make sure that our wind farms will be operational, mostly in the western part of the country, and we also have an aspiration to invest in renewable energy, R&D activities, and along with this green hydrogen journey, we are setting forth on that journey as well, so that we will become one of the main players in Turkey and in the region. Last year, we had made green hydrogen generation. Now it's going to be converted into a large-scale project. And we also, the consortium we're in, has granted 8 million euros. Hopefully, this is going to be taken further. So both Enerjisa management and other renewable energy players in Turkey, as well as the players in Europe, are mainly focusing on these main headings. Of course, we have to make sure that these are socially accepted, socially approved, in the sense that venues that host these power stations are welcoming regarding these projects. I mean, in the sense, the whole country should have more awareness. Permits, the process for the permit, the red tape, bureaucracy, lean management of the permit, financing of the investment. We have to have the right financial resources to invest, and for the earning, we should make sure that there's a mechanism to guarantee all the investment. As for the supply chain, there should be correct optimization of supply chain. As you know, last 3 years have been challenging for the investors. It's not only because of the price of the equipment, but at the same time, it is about the supply chain management. Nearly all suppliers we know that have incomplete wind turbines. Somehow the missing parts are not supplied. This started with COVID, the fluctuation in supply chain, the stress or the depression regarding that seems to continue, and this is reflected onto the project calendars. And of course, the project management has to be done appropriately, and as fast as possible, projects have to be activated and should become operational. Human beings, human workforce, social acceptance, permits, financing, supply chain management, and optimization of it all, so that projects may be managed accurately and appropriately. So there should be a transition. This is how I'd like to conclude. As you have also mentioned, we have diversified portfolio, so just transition has to be made as principles are defined, and countries may then switch to totally renewable, but this should be done in a sound and healthy manner. We are in an effort to ensure that. Thank you very much. Thank you. The technical dimension, you have handled the topic with the technical as well as the social dimension, human or people and culture have a priority. You have also underscored the importance of the foreseeable future. If we have a foreseeable future, we can then prepare the whole ecosystem. That's very valuable. Thank you very much for your input, sir. And in the short term, there are needs in the short term, and long-term transformation should be in well-planned balance. As transformation is underway, at the same time, we should consider today's conditions as well. Thank you for your contribution, sir. I have further questions. With your permission, I'd like to make a concluding remark. Well, there are great opportunities ahead of Turkey. We can set even more aggressive targets, 8,000 solar power station and 10,000 plus megawatts of wind. If I am to compare 60,000 solar, 60,000 wind in Germany. Well, just imagine Germans travel to Turkey to get more sun. So we should have more extensive investments in solar and wind. You have taken it to such a great point because I was going to ask that to Ibrahim Bey. I'd like to now proceed with Ibrahim Bey. How can we proceed with wind? But let me settle this down in a context because I also would like to share some figures from the report and would like to ask your opinion on that. This transformation, this transition, in order to ensure a successful transition, solar and wind should have more share. Those are among the important steps. These are critical success factors. Work conducted shows that by the year 2050, 80 gigawatts of installed capacity would require 7% increase per annum when it comes to wind. So it's going to be 7% CAGR. So that means 200 plus megawatts on an annual basis, and 100 gigawatts of investment would require 3% increase per annum. But work that you conduct as TUREP, as we consider the forecast that you put forward, you also refer to a potential of 150 megawatts. Iksan said we have a long way to go. What about you, sir? What would you say regarding Turkey's potential? Do you think that installed capacity, do you think, do you think, or to what extent do you think it's possible to realize this potential Turkey has, and what are the opportunities? Thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Elif Hanım. Well, İhsan is my colleague, a close colleague of mine at Enerjisa. I'm so happy to hear what he said. For years, we have discussed it. There is always a future perspective at Enerjisa, like it's the case at energy companies. With strategic work, of course, the budget is prepared, and then next 3 years, next 5 years are planned. As much as possible, a vision is drawn in accordance with the vision of the country. What am I doing now? What will I be in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Targets are set accordingly. This is actually one of the most vital issues for a country as well. In this global competition, a country is positioned according to the developments, and this is all reflected onto the vision. So 2023 objectives were disclosed back in 2009, and those targets were set like 20 gigawatts for solar, and we also had targets for wind and thermal, geothermal, etc. For instance, geothermal, Ali Bey will mention, maybe they were a bit too conservative, but then again, the technological developments unforeseen in solar and unforeseen challenges in wind power, targets that were not thought of were set, and it was great. I mean, did we need such targets? Yes, of course. I mean, it may be realized in 20, 30, 40, 50, but anyway, these targets have to be a part of the country's perspective so that the investments in the country or international investments who are planning to come and invest in the country see some commonalities between their vision and the vision of the country. Because if they don't see any commonality, they may focus on other countries. The report you're referring to and the energy plan and the vision were conducted base all the work on certain assumptions. hydrogen and storage, and some other scenarios are worked on. But then again, there's this commonality, just like you mentioned, 80 gigawatt to 100 gigawatt of installation for wind. That's the forecast for wind. And we have some land power stations as well as marine plants. We have 2053 targets for Turkey, and we strongly believe that these are feasible. I'm not approaching this only in a theoretical manner, both at Enerjisa and at other institutions I work. I have specifically worked in this area. I know about the annually feasible number of facilities, and I see this quite accessible, achievable. And in the work that we conduct and the work conducted by the Ministry of Energy with the current technology, we are able to have access to 150. I mean, the wind types may be classified. There may be restrictions, etc. So this is doable when you make the calculation. Of course, we also have to consider different synergies. Multi-sectoral synergy has to be considered, and we have to benefit from that. And when we do that, this is something I'd like to mention in the second part of my intervention. This 150,000 megawatts, maybe 80,000, 90,000 may be feasible. Is that doable? Yes, of course. Back in 2007, as we started with wind, we were working on turbine with a capacity of 2.1 megawatts capacity, 800 kilowatts of turbines we were discussing back then. And today, we are planning the purchase of a turbine for the next 1 to 3 years. It's 5 megawatts to 7 megawatts that we will be discussing. And maybe in a matter of years, we will see that we will then be discussing 10 megawatts. How do we foresee that? Of course, we have 8 megawatts and 10 megawatts standardized in offshore. We are working on prototypes, of course, based on the logistic opportunities. These will be reflected. So in 2020, Turkey had 1,800 megawatts installed capacity. If you foresee that I was 4 megawatts for that, then that would mean 400. If you make it 8 megawatts in the future, it would make 3 megawatts. So in a year, you are able to do that. So are we able to install that 3 gigabytes? Well, this is feasible in practical terms. We have construction teams, we have planning teams. When you consider all of that, this has been realized already. Of course, financing of that investment cost will be a bit higher. So the financing case to be resolved. So I see, as far as I can see it, impossible not to provide financial support to renewables. Indeed, there are significant issues, financial issues. It's not only the financing of renewable projects for other economic activities as well. But then again, this is not going to be forever. This is not going to be continuous. I mean, without hope, of course, we can't continue. We can't go on. EU's Central Bank of the EU and Fed of the US have certain increases in interest rates, and in this world we know that after a certain while this is going to be relieved. So when that's the case, global financing will be enabled. This is not only a requirement for us. I mean, the question that you asked, I wanted to bring a global perspective, and then I'm going to tie it with the other part. Installed wind.
Currently, we give figure we have reached is around 1,000 gigawatt. This is the lowest installation in the past 5 years, has been done in 2022. And the reason for that, the project stages during the pandemic have been interrupted, have been stalled, and that's 78,000 megawatt. The previous 2 years, 2021, 95,000 megawatt global installation. In the coming years, minus 1.5, minus 2 degree targets. Where does it have to come, and what realistically can it be? There are various assumptions. These will go until 100 megawatts, but the reality is the first, just like national plans, EU and USA have long-term plans. Now, within that framework, from globalization to localization, there are regional competition. USA maybe continent-wide has a target. EU has a net zero industry announcement. Repower Europe, 600 gigawatt solar, 550 solar targets are there. For them to reach these targets, in Europe, every year, 50 gigabyte worth of installation has to be done. And for this to be ensured, for this to be doable, significant financing capabilities should be mobilized. So on the turbine side, financing side, for investments to be actual and go into operation, there are huge targets. And parallel to those targets, we should be putting forth our targets, and hopefully that 80,000 megabytes can be more aggressive. Why not 100,000 megawatts? Why in offshore, in 15,000 turbines, install plants on the sea and not benefit from the facilitating factors? This is important. If we put those targets, as I want to say later on, from globalization to localization, there's a shift. Competition, supply chain, attracting investments, the HR that we have trained and we are going to be training. If we integrate them into the system, there will be huge opportunities. Thank you very much. You gave wonderful examples, but the first thing you said was vision is important. Investors need vision and need to know what they're going to invest in. You're saying targets are reachable because what we have previously done in light of developing technologies, even if we just continue with that, these targets may become actual, it seems. But for Turkey, these are important targets. But on the other hand, in the US and in Europe, there will be significant installed capacity. There may be some opportunities, but what could these be? We're going to have a look at those again. With your permission, I'd like to go over to Ali Bey. Of course, solar and wind we talked about. On the other hand, for Turkey, geothermal resources are important. Of course, yes, the main axis is solar, wind, but they are interrupted. They need to be supported with energy storage. We have solutions for that, but coming to geothermal, geothermal is renewable. On the other hand, it can be controlled. So it may seem like an advantageous area of investment. Geothermal resource potential, Turkey is among the top countries in the world in that regard. And the important part of this potential, we have not been able to implement, it seems to me. This potential and the need for this potential to grow was mentioned in the report. The market developments and project stock developments in the areas of opportunities. Thank you very much, Elif Hanım. Before I start, first of all, the sectoral report by IICEC and this organization today within this framework. I'd like to thank IICEC for that. Afterwards, I would like to pay my respects to our audience. We have listened to two very good speeches, İhsan Bey, İbrahim Bey, especially wind was weighted. It's great to hear those, first of all. We believe in the potential and the power of our country as a group of entrepreneurs. Really, the transformation targets of the world and that of Turkey, when we consider those, this potential that is available for Turkey is really very valuable. Be it the wind or the sun or the geothermal, we have huge potentials. Geothermal, of course, as you said at the outset, has not been able to publicize itself or explain its potential very well. One such resource, especially on the other hand, at the point of utilization of this resource. In fact, before we start solar and wind, geothermal was in our lives in this geography, of course. There were some natural outlets that people benefited from. Maybe they have been used for health care or heating, but later on, of course, when we have transitioned to the Republican era, we saw these resources being used for heating and for health and as spas. So what happened today? In fact, in the YEKDEM period, an important part, before we started those investments, there was this notion that these resources were a lot less than what they actually are. But with the work and investments we have done during the first YEKDEM period, we saw that the potential was far greater than that. So for the moment, 1,700 megawatts of installed power is present today, and then this installed power, first in Europe, fourth in the world, is where we are. Geothermal, as I said, it's not in the foreground just because the electricity investments in other areas have a 5,020 megawatt of utilization area. 1,700 electricity, but 5,020 of direct utilization, heating cities, heating greenhouses, and tourism. Thermal is the use of purpose. When we look at capacity utilization ratio in electricity and other direct sources, its contribution to our country is really very high. Maybe in renewable, we may say sector leader. That's how high the contribution is. Of course, one of the important characteristics that you mentioned is high potential, but on the other hand, it's uninterrupted source of energy. We are an uninterrupted source of energy. We may function like a thermal plant. We're not impacted by seasonalities. We are not impacted by day or night, and 85% of capacity factor can function. 15% of internal consumption is what we have. Geothermal, at the point of Turkey's potential has come forth with the most recent investments, but the potential is much higher than we expected. In fact, there's this concept in the world. Geothermal has different ways of discovery. One is natural geothermal resources, resources from which we produce power. On the other hand, other systems developed by the world. I will talk about this soon. There are big developments and big targets on the other hand. We're just looking at natural geothermal resources. recent discoveries have shown that 62 megawatts of thermal energy is present. This is discovered energy. So 1700 megawatt is a power plant currently. 5020 directly benefited from. 62 megawatt, we are benefiting from a very little portion of it. We have this huge potential that we can make use of in the future. Of course, in order to implement these potentials, our sector needs some significant sources, one of which is HR. On the other hand, materials, technology, and a very important and disciplined energy area, geothermal. So we have to be very strong in developing this. 2010, 2020, in the first YEKDEM period, with incentives, we have gone through this stage very rapidly. 250 megawatt of annual capacity addition. Capacity is there. Geothermal has long initial investment stage. There's, of course, source risk at the point of exploration. There are some difficulties for this resource, but within 13 years, from 15 megawatts to, which was done by the public, reaching 1700 megawatts within 10 years, that's really is the miraculous work conducted by the Turkish people. Within 10 years, at the point of utilization of our resources and at the point of the exploration of these resources, important things have happened. As I said, it has made it to official reports. 62 megawatt is the quantity of resource. Of course, the energy corresponds to great energy. When we say 62 megawatt, whether it be direct use or power purpose use, 724 you may use this, and this energy is always there. So the correspondent performance is very high. We're talking about a resource that is as large as the natural gas quantity consumed by Turkey. Of course, different investments and technologies are needed. 62 megawatts is not ready for use immediately today. Why don't we develop it right now? Why don't we benefit from this right now? If we ask these questions, of course, these need investments and technologies that need to be implemented. When we do these, we will be able to implement these resources much better. We may use this on the power plant side and in the direct utilization side. So we'll be able to benefit from these energy resources much better. Thank you, Ali Bey. Thank you for this tour. Here's what you have emphasized. 62,000 megawatt of capacity is currently 1,700 megawatt is power, 5,020 is direct utilization, but there's still a lot of ground to cover, you have said. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to move to Mr. Van den Berg. Yes, so first of all, I'd like to mention that in the Renewable Energy Outlook report, a key success factor in achieving strong growth in renewable space project stock is development of sustainable investment and financing models. So this is stated clearly in the report. And it has also been stated by the other panelists. And we are in an era of addressing twin challenges of enabling clean energy transitions and enforcing energy security at the same time. And financing options are becoming crucial in this regard as well. So we know that you are experienced in energy financing area, and based on your international experiences, can you share with us the investment climate and financing related challenges and opportunities from a global perspective in renewable energies area? And are there any best practices that you can share with us that we could probably or potentially, apply also here locally? So the floor is yours, Mr. Van den Berg.
Yeah, let me start by thanking IICEC again for this kind of invitation to speak on this esteemed panel and the good discussion thus far. It has been in Turkish, which for me is not so easy to follow, but I picked up a few megawatts and points like that. So there are some commonalities in the language. But also equally, apologies if I'm covering certain topics that have been actually addressed by others before, because I was not necessarily completely able to follow the discussion. But as a brief introduction, ING is an international bank, and we operate in over 40 countries in Europe, Asia, and North America. And throughout this network, we speak to a lot of parties, to a lot of people. We gain a lot of intel locally on markets, on developments, and that's quite crucial, I think, particular in the context of renewable energy. Because unlike some other sectors, for instance, oil and gas, renewables is a very fragmented market and is likely to remain so. This means actually that every renewable energy market has their own set of dynamics, very much dependent on topics like the state of a local economy, the nature of the energy mix in a country, be it dominated by coal, by gas, by nuclear, by hydro, or a nice mix thereof. The state of the local grid is, I think, very crucial nowadays, also as well as the ability to interconnect with neighboring countries. Some markets have very good access to gas, other ones or other commodities, other ones are quite isolated. So these are a lot of elements that play into the mix. And I think clearly the message I would like the audience to understand is that there is really no such thing as a global investment climate for renewables. It's very much a localized market. But of course, being present in many markets, we of course see some trends. And those trends I'd like to touch on for today's session. Some of the trends may apply to certain markets, but others may not. It really depends on the circumstances. Now, I think clearly, to start off positively, we have, of course, over the past year seen we've been operating in a very benign environment with relatively stable economic and geopolitical conditions, and with abundant support by governments in general for renewable energy. So that is all been, I think, the easy ride, relatively speaing. It's clear now that the world is facing multiple challenges at the same time. Whereas the clean energy transition started some 15 plus years ago and has seen a phenomenal growth during this period. We've seen real technical innovation, real job growth, real progress to supply the world with clean energy. But I'm also at the same time, actually for the first time, seeing some industry leaders talking about economic headwinds, economic activity that seems to be slowing down. And if you look at the data provided on a global basis by certain of the large data providers, you clearly see that slowdown, in particular, if you exclude China and India. So this is actually occurring right at the time when a lot of governments around the world are stepping up and raising ambitions for green energy growth. But it seems that the investment thesis for clean energy is a bit less compelling maybe than before. And I think good examples of that, if you look at the large wind turbine manufacturers, I'm not going to name names, but I think most people know who I'm referring to. These companies have been loss-making for the past 1-2 years. which is actually quite surprising, because everybody thinks that we're all very busy, everybody needs clean power, we see phenomenal growth rate, and still they're loss-making. So something is happening. And I'd like to say that I think the world is, of course, a less certain place than perhaps 12 to 24 months ago. And I think that actually is slowing down, that uncertainty is slowing down investment decisions. In certain cases, fortunately not that many, even deferring and deterring investment decisions. And I think these uncertainties persist in a number of areas, which are part in the government's control, but part not in the government's control. And I think the key areas where uncertainty persists, I think, is in the permitting and the planning stage. So a lot of clients, developers that we speak to are really struggling to get their projects permitted. And the lead times to get project permitted are, if anything, in most countries actually increasing. Grid access used to be almost a no-brainer. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but clearly securing grid access has become increasingly difficult in many parts of the world. And we even see curtailments rising in renewable energy, which is of course country to what governments actually want. We also see an increasing struggle to obtain land rights, or at least obtain land rights at costs that are affordable, because land is an increasingly scarce commodity. Again, that very much differs by market, but we see in many, let's say, civilized agricultural land is valuable and is also needed for renewable access. So we see more of a struggle on land rights. Now, supply chain bottlenecks are well rehearsed, I think, and are actually real. We see costs rising, we see inflation around the globe creeping into the cost base. So capex for renewable energy is increasing. We hear stories about raw materials or even critical raw materials being scarce or being in short supply. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world that I think about 18, 24 months ago was probably more taken for granted. Now, this is perhaps a bit of a wow factor, like this does not paint a very good business picture for renewables. And I don't want to send that message, actually. I think I'm actually, and I think we as an institution are super bullish on the clean energy pathway going forward, because it is very real, it's very hard to ignore. The government, stakeholders, us as a financing community, we are being asked to shift gear, and that is actually what we have to do as society in a whole. I think achieving the ambitious targets set by the governments, I think, may well take longer than many of us like, but I think the direction of travel is very clear, and we must recognize that the world is only at the beginning of this clean energy transition. So,
right.
Yeah. So what I wanted to touch on is on a financing perspective, because that's I think one of the questions we're seeing that. I think what we're seeing is really that the structures that creep into the market in general are geared to scale, and what I mean by that is people, investors, and banks alike do not want to do 10, 20 megawatt projects anymore. It simply takes too long. It's not cost efficient. They want scale. So what we see very much so is the development of portfolio financings. I think and again, every market is different, but particularly in solar, where you can build scale quicker. Construction for solar is typically more straightforward. We see companies raising capital with a shorter duration, ensuring that you can finance the construction, and then once construction is done, tailor for an offtake contract or maybe a regulatory tariff, but at least get the construction out of the way. We also see very much co-located batteries coming into play to decrease profile risk for solar and wind. I think we even see in certain situations the export credit agencies, which were supposed to support export, actually supporting local renewables rather than just providing support for traditional exports. So I think clearly scaling up where possible is something that I think is at the forefront of the industry. And I think investors, as well as the banks, are geared up for that. A lot of capital on the investment base is raised globally to be deployed in sustainable assets like renewables. And I think the same happens on the bank market. So that, I think, is in a nutshell what we see happening in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Van den Berg. So we have, with other panels, have been talking about ambitious targets. And you are very correct to say that we should take it with a pinch of salt because there are other difficulties that the investors and generally the renewable energy world is facing, because securing grid access is difficult. Land rights are not at affordable prices, supply chain issues there are, and also inflation is adding to the cost base. Therefore, it's important to look at this picture from a realistic point of view. That was one point that you mentioned. And from a financing point of view, we understand that the scale is very important to get finance, and therefore portfolio financing is there on the picture. So these are basically the trends, the global trends. We don't, of course, we understand that there are local peculiarities, but these, let's say, summarize the global trends. Thank you very much for your contributions, very valuable. And I'll shift to Turkish. Nurşen Hanım, sizinle devam etmek isterim.
Nurşen Hanım, let's continue with you. Actually, we may wrap up with you because we are at a great point. Because on the one hand, we have high targets, but then again, as Mr. Van den Berg mentioned, there are some challenges as well as opportunities as well. You are able to bring together different concepts as TÜSİAD. So from this perspective, even if there is the climate crisis, or along with the climate crisis in the ecosystem, there are priorities or topics of priority. There is both in the US and in the EU. There are global actors. As Mr. Van den Berg mentioned, there are international actors focusing on that. We have big industrialists, investors from TÜSİAD. In this ecosystem, how does the business world see the energy investments, and how is renewable energy positioned? We'd like to hear from you. Thank you very much. There are positive sides, and after all these speeches referring to the positive and negative sides, I will try to keep myself closer to optimism. As dear Doğan mentioned, climate crisis is known to all, so maybe I should start from there. Quite clearly, everyone, all stakeholders know that we have to do something, and there is power to do that because we already started feeling the impact of it, and we are to make sure that this is not at an unpreventable point as all parties. When that is the case, we see that there are a couple of motivating factors. One to mention is the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is based on commitment. Unfortunately, 1.5 degrees wouldn't be achievable because of the commitments. We see that the timeline is problematic. But then again, there is the sunny side of it. Every 5 years, these commitments are handled and updated. This is what lies in the spirit of the agreement, and there is serious public encouragement to be made. I think this is going to be done to all the stakeholders. Of course, this is going to be a big motivator for everyone so that everyone has the courage to take further steps. Further measures would be needed where to reduce emissions, for instance. Many companies are focusing on the reduction of emissions. It's part of the strategic planning, and companies are in an effort to take more effective action and encouragement of the public opinion, as I've said. In addition to the encouragement, of course, some countries take stricter measures, some take less strict measures, but then again, eventually the ones that take stricter measures are to preserve their competitive power. They are taking measures from the trade perspective as well. This brings along a green transformation and sustainability, transformation for sustainability. It actually obliges it, and I think it's a great obligation. As for Turkey, energy generation in total emission has a share of 70%. So if we are to discuss sustainability and if we are to fulfill net zero target for 2050, we should start with energy transformation, and renewable, of course, plays a significant role. It serves for the same purpose, but then again, net zero emission targets, in order to meet that target, clean energy transformation should be a part of the energy mix. And we should do that with energy efficiency because there may be a couple of ways to reduce emissions. One way to ensure that is absorption. It may be quite restricted. Then, in order to achieve that, we should start with reduction of the intensification. This is the first one. And secondly, it was mentioned that awareness level is coming to higher levels than carbon pricing. That's going to be an agenda item for Turkey as well. Sustainable development becomes a common understanding at many companies, and there are some sustainable development targets. Strong zero carbon targets are set by companies, and this is done in a voluntary manner. This is for the sake of reputation, and this is also for the sake of ensuring constructive steps for reduction of carbon release. We are aware of the fact that transformation is not at the desired level, nor are the investments. We're aware of that, but I have high hopes with the arrangements to be made with the regulations. We can turn it around because there are other factors actually that kick in as well. Electrification is on the rise, as you know, and electrical vehicles. We have serious targets for EV by the year 2035 in developed countries, and by the year 2040 in developing countries, all vehicles are expected to be electrified and distributed power, distributed energy. When all of these are considered, what has to be done is to do good planning, and there should be foreseeability, and this should be a part of the framework. There are a couple of positive developments in that sense. National Energy Plan, we had really requested that strongly, and that has been recently published. And for hydrogen technologies, a strategy and roadmap have been prepared. Energy efficiency roadmap is underway. Hopefully, that's going to be disclosed soon. And the climate change action plan, there is work focusing on that. Long-term strategy is being worked on. All of those are extremely important in the sense that having so many documents is great, and the synergy between all these documents uh, is equally important. All of these have to be complementary, and all of these documents. Maybe we should consider one more thing. Um, I'm going to mention that in the second part of my speech as I give examples from Europe. There are some policy documents, legislation, R&D, financing, etc., and other implementation mechanisms are to be seen as complementary, and they should be seen as an integral part of the process. So foreseeability may come from there. And these policy framework, if they are made visible, the momentum will be enhanced further on. As for investment, investments have been mentioned already. There is serious need for investment, but there are challenges in that respect. But then again, we should keep in mind that renewable energy and energy efficiency uh, are in such a channel that they may be more on the forefront. Finance institutions should also reflect that on to their portfolio. So all of these should enable us to encourage investment more. With my optimism, I would like to focus on that when it comes to renewable energy. The dynamic structure in the global is also important. This has an impact on all the domestic policies because the changes in the global come mostly from the EU policies or policies developed by the EU because they have very big trade volume and they have big impact in an extended area. So this impact, along with the Green Deal, this impact has been reflected onto all the countries in the supply chain, and the expectation is that the same is done by those countries. Free trade agreements, for instance, are included in the scope, or border carbon adjustment. We also discussed that as well. So those journeys will be obligatory. You would maybe do it as a part of your environmental planning, but then again, this becomes an integral part of the commercial planning, and that may necessitate you to do it at an early stage. Um, because of the regulations, carbon pricing will be adopted, and again, EU regulation, including this, um, will promise a mechanism to follow up carbon footprint, and monitorization of carbon footprint will not be limited to the enterprises. It's going to be reflected onto the whole supply chain. For instance, even if you're not a supplier in Europe, if you are the supplier of an EU company, your company's information about your carbon footprint will be significant as reporting is made. This has to be reported. So where does this take us? This takes us to such a level that our competitive power in the EU, and to preserve and to empower our competitive power, we have to focus on this competitive advantage. And we have to ensure a fast transition. And as we do that, we have to keep our position, because scope 2 is to be evaluated as well. And we hear of new processes up and coming. So when that's the case, the whole decarbonization of the energy system and the value chain brings us to a critical level.
The energy crisis is going to create a deviation. We talked about this a lot, but we have not encountered this. Therefore, we have to continue with this determination because the EU, on the contrary, is going to prioritize their energy independence, and they have done the following. They increase their precautions on energy cleanliness, energy security, and they raised their targets. And on the one hand, they created collaborations with reliable countries to enhance their supply chain and ensure resource diversity. Now, here, the important thing is another point, technology. The EU has issued a very new regulation, net zero industry is the title, but when you review it, you see that there are energy technologies, clean technologies, and many mentions of renewable technology. And there is a significant fund allocated for the technologies, and they have targets like 40% of these technologies being developed in Europe. So we see this new policy area. One of the basic reasons here is it's a reflection of US's law about fighting inflation. Many countries have done similar regulations, but America came up with a very strong packet which contains energy technologies in order to increase energy competencies, in order to increase personal competencies through various mechanisms or project financing. By including many factors, they have put forth a comprehensive package. Clean energy investments that fear that they're going to go over to US has been a reason for Europe coming up with this net zero law. And of course, renewable energy technologies, developing those are important, but equally, as it's in the ITTIM report, the need for critical raw materials. So dependence in that field was another problem. And which precautions can we take here? How can we be more self-sufficient? And how can we become less dependent? Not being dependent for more than 65% for a certain source. More self-sufficient, self-producing, self-technology producing is what they're transitioning to. Another important factor, one of the important vehicle of EU, the global gateway. It is strategic projects for EU outside of the EU is the mission of this mechanism. Global gateway, one of its areas is again the strategic clean energy transformation technologies. There is a concentration towards this area. This concentration should be read as follows. From Turkey's perspective, these collaborations, these technology developments, moving together in supply chains in a period where this is being talked about, Turkey should become an important actor of this technological arrangement. Turkey should be making efforts for this, and this effort should be demonstrated in every sense of the word. I'll leave it at that, but I will say one last thing. The business world and the academia should give an opportunity to develop these technologies. There's the motivation for that. Nurşen, thank you very much. You have addressed the topic in a very comprehensive way. You talked about the internal motivation of companies triggering this transformation, but on the other hand, national texts are critical. We saw these, or there are those that are planned. The synergies there will be important. They should be harmonized and the details should be put forth, we said. And later on, we're in an ecosystem, global developments are impacting us, especially European developments and recent developments, especially in the area of energy technologies. How shall I say? They are noticeable factors, you said. I want to underline this because this is what we'd like to talk about in the second round. But before that, I have an announcement.
There is a simultaneous translation. Therefore, if you click on simultaneous translation on your Zoom, then you can follow the discussions also in English. So I would like to highlight it for Mr. Van den Berg. Okay. Ben ikinci tura geçeyim izninizle.
Okay, the second round with your permission, İhsan Bey. İhsan Bey, in fact, in the first tour, you touched upon it a bit, but you did not elaborate. And I want to ask this in the second round. Green hydrogen. Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook report has shown that green hydrogen development technologies should be improved. Green hydrogen and electrification, it will be used in the transformation of difficult areas, from manufacturing to transportation to points of consumption. These investment areas need to be reviewed from end to end. You can't be localized, you have to develop an end-to-end solution. And both the request and demand should be synchronized with the supply. This is essential. At IICEC, about green hydrogen, you have pioneering developments, and I saw it in the press recently. Now, departing from these experiences for the development of sector, what needs to be done? What are your suggestions? Thank you very much, Nurşen Hanım, because she said most of the things I'm going to mention. As she has said, direction defined for companies and countries in this course of events. The indispensable element is to get rid of carbon load as much as possible, both for the world and also ensuring the sustainability of everything else. In some places, sustainability is important, and in some places, regeneration is important. There's been such damage that something beyond what's necessary should be done. One of the important things here is green hydrogen. There's some momentum in every country. It's of a different scale for increasing renewable capacity in every country. Ali Bey talked about geothermal and renewable. Really, apart from geothermal, all of the renewable resources are intermittent supply chains. We talked about the fact that supply has to be equal to demand. On the one hand, in order to meet the demand, the storage side in power is important. That's where green hydrogen comes in like a miracle, because the issue of storage can be addressed in an environment-friendly manner. Then perhaps it's not wrong to say any given country, any given company, for them renewable or in digitalization, it's not possible to say overinvestment, so long as you don't push limits of an extreme scenario, because that renewable energy source will either go to electron or to green hydrogen, and then will be supplied to the grid. The most important element here is maybe Turkey has this incredible opportunity. I said just now in the first round, Turkey's power and solar installment capacity power is below what needs to be there. But we should not be pessimistic. We should turn this into an advantage because in countries who have done this before, megawatts, 7 million, 5 million, $3 million in solar had been spent to reach those capacities. Same for wind. Now, COVID and equations of the past 3 years reduced the capex, pushed up the capex figures of renewable, but there will be a declining trend. So with less costs, more renewable capacity will be reached. This renewable capacity, in order to use it more optimally, if we position green hydrogen in the ecosystem, we will have assured two things. One, Turkey will have a more environment-friendly and green position. Second, the industrialist, they will have reinforced their export capacity. Not too long, as of October 1st, 5 sectors have started, will be starting to do separate reporting for carbon. There's the issue of carbon at the border. Here, if we want to continue our exports capabilities, if we want to be Europe's supply base in all sectors, we should be doing the green solution rapidly. Ibrahim Bey and Nurşen talked about electrification. Currently, maybe to correct misperception, the first reflex of every industrialist is to put solar panels on their roofs to address the carbon issue. It seems like giving some alms to guarantee heaven. You should be doing a lot more than this. All processes from A to Z, we should be looking at those. In Europe, this is addressed as electrification now, and that electrification should be green, come from renewable resources or from green hydrogen. And we should do our best to rapidly come up with our roadmap, our strategy, and our regulations. As I said, every investment will have 2 gains for us, not 1. We will have addressed our renewable journey. Also, Turkey's exports capabilities will be protected in a sustainable manner. Super summary. Really, not much to add on that. Renewable energy. Let's emphasize this. There's no such thing as overinvestment. Let's do it. If necessary, we'll store it, we'll use it, and there's need for it. Anyway, I wanted to note that. In particular, I would like to go to Ibrahim Bey now. Ibrahim Bey, the Russia-Ukraine war has impacted the world of energy greatly in recent times. Energy supply security has put forth the risks of globalization, and localization is now again on the top of the agenda. Wind turbines. As Turkey, we have important localization. Local technology development is another important area in the report, and you are one of the leading NGOs of this area. What stage are we at in localization in wind, the targets of the sector? At the same time, foreign trade balances, sustainable high contribution opportunities, what can they be? Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to say in the first round as well. Now, the renewable transformation, up until today, the motivation were environmental concerns, long-term greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, and ways of avoiding it. These were the motivations. We were trying to move away from this, to get rid of this. Therefore, let's have certain mechanisms, commercial mechanisms, so that within this competitive market, green energy investments may increase. But first, COVID hit there. In fact, green energy and decentralized energy, we saw how important that was. The supply chain broke down. Suddenly, we understood the importance of the supply chain. Later on, the Russia-Ukraine war exploded, and we understood the supply chain was even more important. In fact, what we called very secure, the main suppliers, suddenly we saw they may very easily not supply it for this, especially the Western world saw this. Thankfully, we had no interruptions, but doesn't mean there won't be. And later on, if this happens in China and Taiwan, what shall we do? Now, the world is considering this because suddenly the supply chain, a more limited supply Russia may be contained in some manner. That's what the Western world thought. But suddenly, these solar panels are coming from China, they said. 95% of those are coming from China, we said suddenly. As if we didn't know this, energy agency reports suddenly pointed this out. And on the one hand, we suddenly realized we lost the technology as well. Well, that's the joking part, but we're all managers and companies. And what we always tell supply chain management, they tell us in the supply chain, we need backup suppliers, but we call a country the factory of the world, but then we thought it should not be called that. And it's the same people who say both things. So we're going through an interesting 3 years, and the same people are telling us where to go from here. What we did so far was right. We're going to change it now, they're saying. With global suppliers, turbine manufacturers, when we talk to them, here's what we hear. We have learned our lessons from the past. We're going to be spreading our supply chain. We're going to be supplying from the Far East minimally. So we're going to be looking to our neighborhood. And suddenly what happened? The US published an AIA. In fact, it's even discussed whether or not this abides by the rules of the WTO. Not everyone can say it out loud, but they call it from globalization to localization. Now, in Turkey, support for the local. It's another version of that mechanism. Are they right? Are they wrong? These are different topics to discuss. Everywhere, what is being done and what is being spoken are wrong. Total globalization and depending in one place is not important, but localization and producing everything yourself, not depending on anyone. When you say that, it's no longer economic. So we have to find a balance between the two, not, the entire world. What I'm going to say here is the following. Installation of the solar has happened, not just in wind, hydraulic, and geothermal, and in solar as well. We have something available. The 100-year past of this country, the last 60, 70 years has been an industrial leap. And in the last decade, this has reflected on renewable energy. Thankfully, some things have actually happened. In wind turbine, we are local beyond 50%. In IICEC turbine, we are targeting 65%. If this is some sort of gain, it will find reflection in the future as from globalization to localization in this world, both Europe and US, the natural gas supplier transition route. Apart from that, we have a chance to be a supplier because the centralized supply chain will be spreading around Europe, and here we have one of the most significant infrastructures, 50%, 60%, whatever.
The industrial infrastructure may be used both for our own needs and also for servicing the allies of Turkey, and we have a great potential to follow in that respect. Let me make it numerical. For instance, $1.5 billion of exports. The wind sector make. We have exports to more than 50 countries. Many towers and turbines and equipment are being produced. More than 100 suppliers are involved in this. It's not only small equipment. They manufacture paint and also spring and pump. In many areas, we provide services. So this is in this transformation is a gain, is an asset, and to ensure that within the country, the potential that we have within the country has to be mobilized. We can't have an industry based on exports only. We can't have human resources focusing on exports only. You can't be a part of the service and maintenance and inspection sector with exports. So seriously, we have to, both for wind and other renewable energy resources, have to enhance capacity so that we may meet the requirements and that we provide support to each and every domain. We see that, for instance, there are systems with storage, significant capacities are being disclosed. Certain capacities are disclosed for no licenses, and in the upcoming term, at least 20,000 for wind and 10,000 megawatts for solar. Capacities will be promised for these two so that we will be able to meet green transformation requirement and will be a part of the competitive picture and the competitive edge in Europe. Foreign trade balance. This is going to bring added value to this balance. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you indeed. You made a great summary. You have referred to the situation we're in. This is actually how we become more aware, and we recognize, of course, it also has some reflections on the international trade. We will see the repercussions in the coming days. Thank you. Now I'd like to proceed with Ali Bey. Geothermal resources. We had listened to the geothermal resources from power perspective, but in your initial deliberation, you referred to the potential and that it may be used as primary source in the industry, geothermal, that is. So in the report, let's take a look at the report to see what's being mentioned. The contribution, direct contribution, most of the potential will come from geothermal until 2050. That's an important finding. So you have a holistic approach to geothermal, especially for the opportunities, non-electrical opportunities. Can you please tell us about the latest development? Geothermal is an important part of this, especially recently. We have been emphasizing this. It is one of the topics that I emphasize. Geothermal use in Turkey started with heating and tourism initially in Turkey. However, unfortunately, the required, as I mentioned, the leaps that we had to build power stations were not completed. We are talking about the thermal capacity, and most part of it, like 5,000 megawatts, have become operational. 1,700 megawatts for power, but then again, the remaining portion is idle. Most part of this capacity discovered may be used in integrated manner. Since Turkey is a tectonic country, as we consider our resources are extended to the whole country. We have intensity of resources, even if it's variable in certain regions across the country, we see that it's distributed, and they have different attributes. Resources have different attributes. As for direct use, these resources are mostly for regional and urban heating and drying of fresh fruits and vegetables. This is another promising sector. It is an important sector because Turkey is a significant producer for fresh vegetables and fruit. But then again, branding is a gap. When it comes to hygienic drying system, which is also affordable, which is also economic, there will be great brands and great products. Spa tourism, this I'm trying to tell everyone for years. Even countries with no geothermal significance have such big shares from this spa tourism, like Japan and Germany. Okay, Japan has some resources, but as for the resources in Germany, they are not even comparable to the levels we have in Turkey. However, thermal tourism and spa tourism, the income generated, they have billions of dollars or billions of euros, and they have thousands of visitors, both domestic visitors and international visitors. So we also have a lot to achieve. Fishing, industrial heating, industrial use. Rather recently, one other thing we've been referring to is geothermal mining. Use of geothermal resources for mining purposes. Certain techniques are used for that, but then again, there is the water and geothermal resources is so rich that there are countries that achieve this, and valuable mines material may be retrieved. We have a project for geothermal mining. The first prototype facility is to be established in a few months' time. The water which is available in Turkey has such rich resources. We are building a facility, and if that facility becomes successful, we will then be contributing to the process. As I've said, geothermal, if I am to make a summary, resources are uninterrupted. They are available in different parts of the country in Turkey. And as I've said, in direct usage areas, we have this claim. I would say in the upcoming periods, as if we are to extend our investments across the country, then at all the housing facilities, we have such strong resources that we may provide heating to all houses. We also have geothermal greenhouse application. This is such an infinite area. Turkey is quite fortunate in that respect because climate conditions and geothermal resources enable us to further develop greenhouse operations, both traditional operations and even tropical products, which we are unable to grow right now, may be grown in Turkey as we consider the shift in climate and the impact of climate change. Access to food will be problematic. Most of the places are faced with challenges when it comes to the growing of food products. And in the upcoming period, many products we take for granted will be challenged. Some products will not be possible because climate change will have a big impact. So controlled production will require greenhouses, and 40% of the input is heat resources. If this is retrieved from geothermal resources, it's going to be affordable. So integrated use will be the direction to go. We have so many facilities with these qualities. For instance, if we have a geothermal resource that we use for power purposes, for electricity, if we take all of it, even if we take all of it, we may only use or allocate 15 to 25% of that for electricity. The rest we may allocate for other purposes like regional heating, and then greenhouse operations and drying, for instance, mining, for instance, and some other industrial uses. And spa tourism may come after this. So one resource may be used for multiple purposes, and the economy actually just adds up to it. There are some examples in Turkey, and these examples are also observed in other parts of the world. So multiple use of one resource and creation of economy with that. So this is going to provide a response to your questions. During the initial session, there was something that I was unable to mention. I'd like to add that as well, if I may. Turkey is quite rich when it comes to resources, geothermal resources. I have given you the figures, but furthermore, there will be more. We're not as fortunate as we are in wind and solar because it's underground. So work is required to make search and discover. And we have other natural resources, as I've said. It's beyond the current amounts, maybe 10 times more. That's the first thing. Secondly, there's this new global trend. Underground heating is infinite resources. Geothermal is like the sun of the underground. It's infinite and it's stored already. We're discussing storage, but then again, this is stored underground anyway. Unfortunately, geothermal, we somehow have being late, and so is the rest of the world. I mean, you may not find natural resources everywhere because of the tectonic movements or volcanic movements. These resources may become natural, but then again, in different parts of the world, and also in Turkey, even if we have rich resources, we may have difficulty in accessing them from natural methods. So new technologies may sometimes be used in order to have access. And for that, there is this important global trend. All developed countries are to retrieve these underground resources. To bring these out, new R&D activities are conducted. And we also have to be quite fast and quite ambitious about this as well. If we are able to achieve these technological leaps, we will then be extremely successful. With some artificial systems, and these heat resources are retrieved and are put in use as desired. So if we can capture this trend, we will then be developing our technology, and in this sense, we will also have quite a large amount of energy. It's not only for us ourselves. I mean, it would be sufficient for the whole world. It's quite rich. And this we have to take action. For that, we have to take action as fast as possible. So this is how I can respond to your question. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you very much. Yes, geothermal is associated with power generation mostly, but you made a great summary. And you said that this is naturally retrieved and this is available everywhere with new technological development. These may enable us to have access to further resources.
Yes, so Mr. Van den Berg, we've been discussing about this globalization point. Okay, so Let me explain it in that way. Energy security challenges, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war, seem to introduce a new paradigm that is different from globalization and favors new strategies such as localization in critical energy technologies and positioning in relevant supply chains in alternative geographies. So, as we can also see, US and EU are taking steps in these directions. We also observe incentivizing localization of relevant technologies in both US and EU. We know that previously the attitude towards projects involving localization were not positive in terms of financing. So we want to understand, because localization attempts were seen as adversely affecting international competition. So do you expect a change of attitude for financing of projects with such incentives related to localization from this point on?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we clearly see the step up by the government to localize or seek to localize part of the manufacturing chain in various places. It's not only the EU and the US, it's also in parts of Asia. And I think it's a natural way not only for securing energy supplies, but also to make sure that the local workforce can, for instance, get deployed in certain technologies or manufacturing capabilities. So the EU clearly is looking to establish its own solar panel production. Yes, to reduce its dependence on China. I think clearly, yeah, there's a question, of course, to what extent you can compete with in terms of labor and electricity costs, or where all the raw materials will come from. But there's a clear trend there. I think the US, of course, has a different with the Inflation Reduction Act that Biden introduced is a quasi-localization drive, but it's also, I think, more an investment drive. But part of that investment drive is also to localize certain production more to the US. And I think in terms of localization, I think we need to really distinguish on what that localization really means and what the purpose is, and also where it's taking place. So in the context of the IRA in the US, it is clear that certain large manufacturers, a good example is the likes of we're building giga battery manufacturing capabilities in Europe that will be batteries that will be mostly deployed in electric vehicles. And I understand a number of these developers are looking to relocate their production to the US and benefit from economic incentives provided under the IRA. Is that localization, or is that just a shift of production capacity to where it makes most economic sense? I think a little bit in the middle. But for the financing community, I think it really depends on where that localization is taking place, because at the end of the day, the international financing community can and will look across borders, but obviously we'll also look at is that localization leading to a more cost competitive proposition, or is that actually really to support local labor deployment, and hence the scale of that production capacity may not reach, let's say, a scale which is economically beneficial. So I think that is actually one of the concerns, I think, typically voiced by international community, that we're supporting something locally that actually is not cost competitive in the long term, or actually get hampered by certain local restrictions for funding. So it can be withholding tax or other specifics that may need to be tackled and that may actually not allow certain international players to compete in local markets. So I think it is really important that a local market where localization takes place is actually able to also support from a financing perspective that localization. The other adverse point, of course, that the financing community often experiences that if you start to do localization and put production capacity in certain markets, that means that certain export credit agencies are no longer able to support business and business flows, export flows, so to speak. So that's obviously, I think, in many of the developing markets, we see export credit agencies still playing a crucial role in the funding for projects. And obviously, if that export credit agency would not be able to fund an export anymore, that liquidity needs to be replaced locally. So I think that's and whether that eventually is cost competitive or not will depend on the local market conditions and local liquidity available in markets. So I think, but the fact that we simply put exclude ECAs from participating going forward in assets which have a strong amount of localization. So let's say 60-70%. That can actually impact financing and the financing community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van den Berg. So we understand that each business case will be evaluated on its own based on the level of localization, its effects, and based on its local circumstances. And I'm sure that will bring a lot of discussion going forward. Thank you very much. Aslında süremizi de bayağı aştık ama
we have really gone way over our time. I hope Nurşen will be wrapping up. And I think we're going to tie it in with the beginning. How technical and technological context and the social introduction of the business. Maybe we should be wrapping it up like that again. Dear Nurşen, in her work in TÜSİAD, she's been addressing the topic from many different perspectives. In this transformation, HR competencies, technology, innovation, and we know these are important. The report also states these to be important. What I'm going to ask of Nurşen is the TÜSİAD perspective. But before that, on the EDIDER side, how we're going to looking at this topic as far as digitization, I'd like to say this. Of course, with the change in technology, unlimited opportunities are available. We can benefit from the potential, only very little. When we look at the energy sector perspective, AI, IoT, cloud, these are emerging into the foreground. And for digitization in energy, there are great opportunities. When talking about this, I always say the following. The grid of the future is the power grid, because there'll be big transformations in the power grid. We talked about decentralized energy very little, especially in the production of energy, the presence of many points, the presence of storage, ship-directed energy flows. We're going towards a very chaotic grid, really. And we always say, without digitization in the grids, we will not be able to be fully digitalized. The statistics is as follows. In the European grid, in 2025, 36 million new grid elements will be there, producing, consuming points, managing points. By 2030. This will reach 98 million, it is said. Every year, there will be this many elements added to the grid.
Yönetmenin ne kadar zor olduğunu hayal edebilmemiz lazım.
We should be able to think of how difficult it will be to manage it.
Adımlar atmazsak
If we don't take steps in order to digitize the grid, the transformation will not happen. We will not be able to manage the grid of the future in the absence of AI, for instance. This is so clear to see. So, I said that digitization has an important role in this transformation. Now, I'm passing it over to you. Thank you very much. Hopefully, I will be able to conclude as you expect. And I'll start from where you left off. Digitization, okay, it's important, but not without the human being. So we should start from the people part of this. In Building the Future report, issued for the 50th anniversary of TÜSİAD, we had suggested 3 leverages: people, science, and institutions. In the absence of these 3 leverages, it's not possible to build a healthy future. Of course, we're in such a period that first, always training, human competency is being talked about. However, digital competencies entered our lives. There's been a great momentum. But then we realized later on that in green transition, the same thing is needed. There's a need of competent people for the right kind of work to be conducted. In the end, for twin transformation, competent human resources are definitely going to be invested in. And we are making serious efforts in this regard. I will start from the international side and share a few figures, and I'll keep it short because I do realize that we have really gone way over time. And I'm going to give some information about Turkey and something from TÜSİAD. And Deloitte, we work with Deloitte Digital as TÜBİTAK TÜSİAD. High technology, call to action is what we did. And the contribution and potential of digitization, especially the sectors. And it's no surprise, but energy was included. It has significant potential, incredible figures for employment opportunities. Figures may change from report to report, so I will not go into it, but there's an incredible economic contribution to the process. In this area, what is focused on the most? Renewable energy is creating significant employment. Business models in energy, as you have also said, will go to a totally new place. In fact, what we're talking about just now, dear Kıvanç Bey said something. From now on, we will not be selling power. The power sector will survive by selling something else. That's the world we're evolving to. The tools that we supply will be more important. Starting from US, the EU, as I said just now, Net Zero Industry Act. An important component of this is based on skills. The people who are going to be developing the technology should be created. You should be ensuring the competencies and certain collaborations, partnerships. They will try to develop the capacity to come up with those technologies. And that technology developing competency, in order to make it more systematic, net zero industry academies will be established, including seed investments. In fact, this will be planned in a long-term manner. It shows how seriously we need to take this issue of competencies. Some arrangements in IRA are maybe a lot more noticeable. Developing competent labor force, and we should prioritize incentives that include people. If there are people in it, they support it. In Turkey, these may be used as use cases for some policies. We know that International Power Agency is working on this. Power-related labor force is important. It has the highest employment creating potential. This is from the employment report published for the first time. Now, the energy sector, when compared with other sectors, requires more qualified employees, and 45% of the labor force are on an undergraduate level. So it does require higher education. After talking this much technology, I think this will increase even more. On May 1st, 2 days ago, another report was prepared, World Economic Forum, Future of Jobs. And in that report, there were interesting evaluations about the energy sector. First of all, digital and green transformation skills, especially employees who need to prepare in the middle of their business lives, retraining, worker training. These will be the contributions. The interesting is that when Turkish managers answered this survey, they said such jobs will be higher in numbers in Turkey compared with the rest of the world. So the investment will pay itself off. One more interesting thing, again, in the sense of the businesses of the future, one of the most important potential areas is renewable energy engineers, solar energy installation experts, and system engineers, which is an important connection for transition. In Turkey, especially, unfortunately, in fact, we worked on a report into TÜSİAD about the need for HR in energy sector. They do not remain. We can't find employees on every level, they're saying. We see that this is still the case. Well, that being the case, maybe what do we need to do in order to ensure competent employment? Maybe a two-stage work can be offered. Insurance of green employment, for that industry academy, vocational school coordination should be reinforced through special programs, special planning needed. Maybe technology will be stronger in this. So high technology-based clustering models, digitization and technology research institutions should, on energy systems and energy technologies, by taking note of international studies, wherever we need competition or need, maybe they will prioritize about the energy sector and invest a bit more here. The business models will create opportunities. We have to think of these. And energy need, which is already important in development, if we could ensure it from stronger teams, it will be valuable. Not energy specific, but there's an area of opportunity about energy as well. The name is industry transformation, but there's an area of opportunity about every sector. Technology suppliers and technology users meet on this platform. There are more than 2,000 technology suppliers, accessible 24/7, this platform, and there, in fact, energy efficiency and some calls were announced there. But at the point that we're at, as you have just said, there are many stages of energy about digitization, renewable energy integrated into the system, decentralized energy operations, storage, energy efficiency. In all of these areas, some innovative projects should be worked on. And I think we're going to be encountering more of those, and I'm excited. Thanks again, IICEC, for the invitation, and thank you for this very good moderation. Thank you. Okay. Renewable energy for sustainable future. We have come to the end of the panel. Very, very valuable opinions have been shared. Each and every panelist provided great content. Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Berg.
Thank you.
I would like to thank IICEC for the work conducted on this report. I greet everyone with love. Goodbye.